Madam Director, my concern with this budget and the ideology that has produced it is that it takes us far from the fundamental principles that have produced the prosperity and freedom that Americans once enjoyed. Except for World War II and the COVID panic, the sheer size of spending is unprecedented, both in its amount and as a percentage of GDP. Free markets are inherently democratic because every consumer, every day, votes with every dollar that they spend on what they want the economy to produce and at what prices they're willing to pay. When you take the dollar they would spend for their needs and instead spend it yourself for whatever lofty purpose, you've not only reduced their standard of living, but you've also harmed the economy by moving it away from producing what consumers need to what government officials want. Of course, it's necessary to pool our resources to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, but the farther that we stray from these core responsibilities, the more we damage our prosperity and our freedom. You might think you're helping people, but you're not. In a free market, the only way to make a dollar is to figure out what somebody else needs and provide it for them better than they can provide it for themselves. If I take a dollar from Peter and give it to Paul, Peter's earned that dollar by helping others. Paul hasn't. I take a dollar from Peter and give it to Paul. Paul's got an extra dollar to spend, that's true. But Peter now has one less dollar to spend in that same economy. And here's the real damage. You've robbed both of a dollar's worth of incentive to help each other. Peter, because he no longer benefits by helping others for that dollar, and Paul, because he no longer needs to. And I also find this argument between deficits and taxes to be silly. They're the same thing. A deficit is simply a future tax in the form either of debt or inflation. It's all driven by spending. Taxes harm the current economy, borrowing harms the future economy, and inflation hollows out people's savings and purchasing power. That's why no country has ever taxed and borrowed and spent its way to prosperity. Just as you can't drink yourself sober, you can't spend yourself rich. Now, you used your entire presentation telling us how great the economy is. Well, the problem is you can't spin the economy. People know perfectly well what's going on in their own lives, and trying to tell them otherwise only makes you look foolish. You need to stop that. Americans are soon going to ask themselves, are we better off today than we were 4 years ago? And you'd better have a better answer than doubling down on policies that 2/3 of Americans are desperately trying to tell you to put their families and their country on the wrong track. Instead of looking for new ways to spend money, we should all be looking at ways to save it. Republicans have a lot of suggestions we're trying to share with you. Require able-bodied adults to work as a condition of receiving benefits. Stop flooding the labor market with illegal aliens. Stop subsidizing political cronies whose products people don't want to buy. Stop sending money to countries that hate us. Stop bailing out banks from their own bad decisions. Get out of the way and unleash America's energy resources. I could go on. Bill Clinton reached across the aisle in 1994 and declared that the era of big government is over. Together, a Democratic president and a Republican House achieved some remarkable things. Together, they reformed the welfare system. They cut spending as a percentage of GDP. They produced what amounted to the biggest capital gains tax cut in history. They balanced 4 budgets in a row, and they produced the biggest economic expansions in our nation's history. We can do that again if you decide to join us. But in the meantime, I guess I've just got a simple question for you. What makes you think that socialism is going to work any better here than everywhere else in the world it's ever been tried?
Mr. McClintock, I'll just add one thing to the Clinton administration. Taxes as a percent of GDP were 19.6%, very similar to what we're proposing here. So part of the solution is a tax policy that asks the wealthy and large corporations to pay more. I have a simple proposition too, and this is where we differ. The oil industry had $200 billion in profit last year. One loophole closure would save $31 billion.
Do you not understand that corporations don't pay corporate taxes. A corporate tax can only be paid in one of three ways. It's paid by consumers through higher prices, it's paid for by employees through lower wages, and it's paid for by investors through lower earnings. That's your retirement fund. So when you say you're only taxing corporations, what you mean is you're raising the taxes on every consumer, every employee, and every investor.